Hi everyone, welcome today to the very first webinar in our Latinx Civil Rights webinar series. We're so happy to see everyone join us today to discuss a couple of topics and introduce more than anything this amazing series and the Network for Justice. So today to talk about the Network for Justice and this Latinx Civil Rights webinar series are two amazing professors that have been the facilitators of this project and have been with us through the inception of it. So first we have Dean Luz Herrera, and Dean Herrera is currently a professor of law and associate dean for experimental education at Texas A&M School of Law. And before entering academia, Professor Herrera ran her own practice and founded the Community Lawyers Program, Inc., which is a nonprofit organization that encourages access to affordable legal services and develops innovative opportunities for legal professionals in underserved communities. She also is one of the pioneers of the low bono service delivery models and has just been a champion in Latinx civil rights research and academia. We also have Professor Leticia Saucedo, who is a professor of law at UC Davis School of Law. She's an expert in employment, labor, and immigration law and teaches immigration law, employment and labor law, and torts law at UC Davis. She's also been a visiting professor at other schools, including Duke Law School, and a research scholar with the Chief Justice Warren Institute on Race, Ethnicity, and Diversity at UC Berkeley, and her research interests lie around the interceptions of employment, labor, and immigration law. And together, these amazing women, these amazing Latinas, have gotten together with the American Bar Foundation to bring us this amazing project. So, Dean Herrera, Professor Saucedo, off to you.
Great, thank you, Nayeli. This is Nayeli Dominguez, who's a third-year student at Texas A&M, and we're very happy for her to be involved and to help us with this program today. So Nayeli has already made the introduction, but I wanted to maybe say a few words about the Network for Justice and then turn it over to Professor Saucedo. But as we're doing that, we really want to make sure that we know who's on the webinar, because we want to know who's here and who should we be talking with. How should we focus our comments? So if you wouldn't mind, please filling out the poll, that would be really helpful. So you'll see it there on your screen. So the Network for Justice is a project that started as part of the Future of Latinos in the U.S. project that's part of the American Bar Foundation. It was a project that was initiated, the larger project was initiated by Professor Rachel Moran, who's now at UC Irvine School of Law, and Robert Nelson, who has had a number of different roles. At the time, I believe he was the president of the American Bar Foundation. And so for a number of years now, this particular research project has been looking at what the future of Latinos looks like and what the future of the U.S. looks like, with Latinos being a third of the population in 2060. And so part of what we looked at in the Network for Justice was really thinking about how do we create a network that helps us create a country that puts Latinos not as a side project, but at the center of it. If 1 in 3 Latinos or 1 in 3 people in the United States are going to be Latinos or Latinx, whatever the word it is that you prefer to use, what does that look like? What does that look like through our eyes, through our vision? And so part of our series that we're kicking off helps us discuss some of the issues in civil rights that we think are important to address. Our project for the Network for Justice really focuses on a number of 4 different distinct issues, and most of our activities will focus in one of these 4 areas, which Professor Saucedo will talk about in more detail, but they're basically education, voting rights, immigration, and political participation, or civic engagement more than political participation. That's a little bit broader. So I want to turn it over to Professor Saucedo to say a few words, and before and after she does that, we're going to launch you into a video that tells you a little bit about the inception of the Network for Justice. But before we do, I wanted to acknowledge here that we have a variety of folks. I mean, we have about a fifth of the students of people are law students. But we have 41% that are other. So I want to hear more about who these other are. So you guys tell us, all you others that are 41% of folks listening to us, I'd love to hear what your affiliation is, so that we know who's part of this webinar series. Professor Saucedo?
Thank you, Professor Herrera, and thank you all for putting this together, Texas A&M and the folks at Texas A&M who have given us the platform to launch this webinar series for the fall. I got involved because Professor Herrera was in California at the time and asked me to help co-direct the pilot project for the Network for Justice in California. So what I'll be speaking from the perspective of this pilot project in California, where we have a number of advisory members and advisory group who are essentially leading us to those opportunities where we can put together networks or nodes of people that are working across platforms, that be they lawyers, law students, academics, policymakers, and people at the community level. So I look forward to our discussion today and hope that you get a better sense of what we're trying to do with the Network for Justice across the country, not just in California.
In November 2016, the American Bar Foundation hosted a planning summit to launch a pilot Network for Justice in California that promises to transform Latino civil rights through sustained collaboration among community organizations, the practicing bar, scholars, and law and policy schools. The summit convened over 40 politicians, academics, community advocates, and emerging leaders who met to discuss the needs and the goals that should drive the Network for Justice. All of those in attendance agreed that the need for the network is urgent, not just in California but around the country, given the already large and ever-growing access to justice gap in the Latino community. So, while the effort to launch the network will begin in the Golden State, our ultimate goal is to lay the foundation for an initiative that will be national in scope.
No vamos a poder hablar de inclusión ni de equalidad, egalidad, si no le damos a toda nuestra población, a toda la población latina, el mismo acceso a la justicia, el mismo acceso a la información, el mismo acceso a oportunidades que otras poblaciones tienen. Existe un gran cisma entre la población latina que habita en las ciudades a la población latina que habita en las comunidades rurales, por temas de educación, por temas de acceso a servicios y de acceso a personas confiables y organizaciones confiables.
The greatest problem or issue facing Latinos in California, if not the United States, it's pretty simple: lack of access to justice. And there's several reasons that we find ourselves in this situation. Number one, Latinos overall powerless to some degree, although we're making substantial improvements in that regard, but still not truly recognized as an important element of this country. Second, really lack of coordination between Latinos and various groups and organizations to try to move the ball forward so that Latinos can have true access to the law and access to justice.
This access to justice gap is a pressing concern, not just for the Latino community, but for all Americans concerned about our nation's future prosperity and its commitment to fairness and inclusion. According to 2015 American Community Survey data, there are 56 million Latinos living in the United States. Nationwide, Latinos have traditionally been one of the fastest growing segments of the population. According to the Pew Hispanic Center, 54% of the country's population increase from 2000 to 2014 was the result of a growing number of Latinos. At the core of this population boom, significant inequalities persist. From 2005 to 2009, median household wealth among Latinos fell by 66% compared to other groups. Nationwide, approximately 21% of Latinos live in poverty and 23% are uninsured. These challenges are daunting, but across the nation, communities, organizations, and individuals already advocate on behalf of Latinos. If the Network for Justice can help these critical agents of change to join forces and share information, it can maximize their impact through coordination, cooperation, and collaboration.
The point of view of a community law clinic, where we're providing services in the community and the community has access to us in the clinic, we see tremendous issues not just around immigration and the need for immigration reform and sane immigration policies. We actually see it come up in thinking about education and access to education and access to the real resources communities need to thrive.
The Network for Justice will also foster diversity, equity, and inclusion in the legal system by building a pipeline of leadership for the next generation of community organizers and legal minds who can provide services to the Latino community in a sustained, culturally competent way. As of 2014, only 7.9% of law school graduates were Latino.
Nosotros entendemos de que para tener acceso de la ley tenemos que, especialmente para la comunidad latina, tenemos que tener abogados latinos y latinas. ¿Por qué? Porque muchas veces lo que ocurre es que la gente, si no ve que uno de ellos está hablando como ellos hablan, no los van a entender, no prestan la confianza.
Our network should encourage law schools to establish new programmatic offerings, which will elevate the quality of legal education and provide additional training opportunities in the public sector. We hope these opportunities will encourage young Latinos to enter the legal profession in greater numbers. This advancement of knowledge and diversification of law students will produce a practicing bar that can better serve all clients, especially the Latino population.
Another challenge is making sure that all Californians, including Latinos, know of the incredible promise of careers that they can have in the legal system, so they can grow up to be prosecutors, defense counsel, public defenders, lawyers for big companies or small businesses, teachers who teach the law to the public, and having a set of attorneys that come from all backgrounds is a great thing for California.
A Network for Justice can help remedy this gap because it will give the community a way to become self-sufficient. I think it's important for legal agents to go and educate the community, but not be there as a crutch for the community. I think the importance of the network is that it will bridge the gap that exists so that the Latino community can then just propel itself on its own.
This effort, led by Texas A&M Professor of Law and Associate Dean for Experiential Learning Luz Herrera, and Professor of Law at the University of California at Davis, Leticia Saucedo, will bring together community members to support collaborative efforts to advance access to justice for Latinos. Together, we can make a difference to the future of Latinos in the United States.
Great, thank you for being patient with our audio. I think we finally got it, so thank you.
Wonderful. So thank you so much, Kirsten, for that video, and we hope everyone enjoyed that video. And now we want to discuss a little bit more about the Network for Justice. So we saw a couple of amazing things that this network is doing for the video. But now to see where we can take it going forward and how we can use it to propel all of these experiences and help us really advance Latinx civil rights, we're going to ask our two trailblazers a couple of questions to learn more about how we can take part in this. So, Professor Herrera, so how has this project evolved from what we saw in the video? And can you give us some examples of some of the things that we've gained through it?
Right, so as I mentioned earlier, this project started off as as part of the American Bar Foundation as a research project, but obviously, even from the inception, we quickly understood that there needed to be kind of, a research and action element of the work. And so that's why we developed this idea for the Network for Justice. And so the last few years, the video was done in 2016. So a lot has happened since 2016. A lot has also not happened since 2016. But, a lot of what we've done is really figure out how to find the different constituencies that could help build the network. So we started off, Pilar Escontes Hernandez and I, who's sitting for the bar in California currently and has been a big mover and shaker in the alternative bar movement in the United States. She and I wrote an article that talked about the history, that explained the Network for Justice and really talked about the history of legal issues in these 4 areas that we described as, immigration, education. We focused on voting rights for political participation and economic opportunity. So that was one of the things we did, is really kind of figure out how, kind of what the legal issues were. We really started off this project, and why the reason why the video was focused on California is because we started a pilot project in California. The idea of a network is really being able to connect people in different areas with each other to share information. So just to be clear, we're not a separate nonprofit organization. We don't have a separate source of funding. We're not a grant maker. We're really kind of folks who saw a need to figure out how to, we saw that there was all this great work being done all over the country and all over the states that we were in, but that people weren't connecting and sharing with each other. And so the network really allows us to begin to do that. The pilot project in California involved creating an advisory group that would help envision what the work in California might be. And so we've had several meetings with that advisory group, and part of that group is also responsible for this webinar series. Among some of the things that they thought was very helpful was, one, to figure out how to have the larger cities be a resource to the more rural areas, such as the Central Valley in California. And another idea was, or another issue that came up, is that we really have to create the pipeline for attorneys and for community leaders, not just lawyers, in these different spaces that are truly advocating for Latinos or Latinx issues. And so, so those are some of the projects. Amongst the constituents that we reached out to were obviously some, academics, both in law schools and outside of law schools, but also particularly our clinic colleagues throughout law schools around the country. We've gone to that group in a couple of situations to try to identify places in law schools that could be resources to communities that are organizing or have projects that they might need some legal assistance for. We've also hosted worked together with MALDEF to put together a voting rights conference to train litigators to take on the new round of redistricting that will happen in the next few years. And so we've really done a number of things and all it's really been done on a volunteer effort. It's not part of our job responsibilities to do this, but we just really believe that there's a need to connect people with each other, particularly those communities that don't have as many resources that exist in some of the larger cities or cities that have larger Latinx populations. And so we've done a couple of seminars, like I said, a couple of conferences in different locations. And the webinar series, as I mentioned, is really something that we've put together as part of a pipeline project to reach out to younger generations who might not know the context of what they're seeing happen around them, and also as a way to not just educate students, but there are a lot of community activists and organizers that might not be privy to some of the history and the resources and the people who are working on these issues. So we'll talk more about the webinar, but these are just some ideas. One of the biggest and most important, I think, contribution that we've made is create an online platform that's based on the Mighty Networks platform, and we'll introduce you to that in a little bit. That really helps you understand how you might be able to connect with each other through the Network for Justice. So those are just some of the ideas, some of the programs that we've advanced, and I think there's more, but we only have limited time on this webinar, so I'll give you an overview.
Awesome, thank you, Fran. So we've seen how important, obviously, this movement is, but why do we need the Network for Justice?
So as far as we know, I think there are no networks that are attuned to thinking about legal issues as they arise from a perspective of how they affect the Latino community. And by networks, I mean intentional connections of lawyers at the public and private sector, legal academics, students, professionals, and people who are working at the community level working across their own platforms to figure out strategies to help the Latino community, and strategies for changes in the law that are Latino focused. So why do we need a Latino focus? I think the demographics explain themselves, and they explain themselves quite well in the video. But they also give us great insight into how that perspective is important today, now more than ever. Latinos are the fastest growing minority in the country, and in many cities they are already becoming or have become the majority. In Texas, across the border, they are the majority in towns, in rural areas, and in cities. And the numbers, I think, haven't translated into a real critical mass in the legal profession or in political representation. So Teresa Reyes-Flores, a third-year student at Texas A&M, has been working with us as we develop the network, and she's put together a presentation of those demographics. So I'm going to hand it over to Teresa so she can describe the demographics as we see them now.
Thank you. Okay, so as it was mentioned, this presentation is just updated statistics on the Latinos in the United States and in the legal profession as a whole. You can move on to the next slide. Okay, so first off, in 2019, there were almost 61 million Latinos in the United States. Over the last decade, the population growth among Latinos has slowed with a 1.9% increase between 2015 and 2019. The Latino population grew the fastest in the South than in any other region in the United States since 2010, with a 26% increase. And Latinos are among the youngest racial or ethnic groups in the United States. And then on the right of the screen, you can see the projected Latino populations from 2020 to 2026. And it is projected to reach 111 million by 2060. You can go on to the next slide. In 2020, approximately 4.6% of lawyers were Latinos, and for law students, it was 4.36%, with 1.82% being Latino men, 2.53% being Latino women, and 0.01% being Latino other. You can go on to the next slide. It is important to note that most state bars and state licensing agencies do not track the race and ethnicity in the profession. In 2020, 21 states reported the race and ethnicity of lawyers, which was up from 19 states in 2010. Therefore, we were only able to get data from California and Texas, which is two of the states that have the highest Latino population. So in California, there's 7% of Latino attorneys with 39.4% Latino population, and in Texas, it was 10% Latino attorneys with a 39.7% Latino population. So this slide gives the numbers of Latino elected officials at the federal and state level and federal judges as well. There were a total of 32 total Latino elected officials at the federal level in 2019, and there were 347 total Latino elected officials at the state level. The percentage of federal judges who are Latino was 6.5% in 2020, which is a slight decrease from 6.6% in 2016. And 90 federal judges identified as Latinos, and 5 others identified partially Latinos as of July 1st, 2020. You can go on to the next slide. And this slide gives the numbers for the Latino elected officials at the local level. So the first table gives the total Latino elected officials in the United States, which was 6,443 Latino elected officials. And then the 3 tables give the numbers for the top 3 states with the most Latino population, which is New Mexico, Texas, and California. It is important to note in this one that approximately 75% of the total Latino elected officials are in these 3 states. First off is Texas with 2,686 total Latino elected officials at the local level, then California with 1,592, and lastly, New Mexico with 634. And that should be it for the numbers.
Thank you so much, Teresa, for those numbers. Obviously, the numbers don't lie. They're important and they're shocking, and they reveal more than anything a reality for the need for this network. But now, Dean Herrera talked a little bit about the network, who can be involved, but who all is a part of this network and who can be involved? Who do we invite to contribute to this network?
So far the network, which started as a pilot in California, as you've heard already, most of the activity of the network has happened in California. It's grown into Texas thanks to Professor Herrera moving to Texas and to Texas A&M. And in California, the network includes an advisory committee that brings together legal organizations, political organizations, private and public interest attorneys, legal academics, and other academics, economists, sociologists, policy advocates, heads of policy centers. And the group meets quarterly with the goal right now of educating across the silos and creating those spaces for building Latino-focused strategies. So the voting rights workshop that Professor Herrera talked about was one of those strategies. So every quarter, we sort of get together and think about the projects that might make sense given the needs of the people who are actually doing this work. So the voting rights workshop is an example, right? That came out as a result of several discussions about who it is that is involved in voting rights work, in redistricting work. And we started to see that the folks who are sort of the icons of voting rights litigation are starting to retire. And so it was really important to start to think about how do we build that network of young emerging attorneys who are interested in this issue and who are sort of willing to take on the mantle. And so the workshop was really identifying those folks and bringing them together with the legal experts, the people who have done litigation in the past around this issue, so that they could start to connect with each other, and so that we could start to pass along the knowledge and the information. But with respect to who can be involved, anybody can be involved, as long as they're interested in the issues that we have identified as the issues that we think that are important to the Latino community, that impact the Latino community the most.
Thank you so much for that, Professor Saucedo. And those that want to be a part of the network, what can they contribute? What can they gain? How can they be involved throughout this process?
Sure, so I'll take that. I know we have, folks like I asked who's involved, and we had a medical student answer, we have paralegals answer, and professors answer. So it's really a wide network. Really, the goal is about connecting folks who are working on these same issues and who care about the same issues. And so the best way you can contribute immediately is we're going to show you the Mighty Networks platform that we are on. And so you can log in, post information about things that you might be working on, right? If you're a faculty member, it might be an article that's related to one of these 4 areas, or a study that you did. If you're a law student, maybe it's an activity that you've put together that's now, now we can go into activities across the states because everything's on Zoom. So if you want to invite other law students or others to participate, we can do that as well. We have a place where we can post events on this online link. There might be some of you who say, there are a number of us working on this, but we are siloed off, and we'd love to be able to create an advisory group that could maybe think about what an agenda in my local community looks like to advance a network for justice. And you can also become involved in that way by identifying maybe, an advisory board of 7 to 10 people that would be interested in advancing a particular platform that focuses on Latinx civil rights issues. And you can contact us and we'll help you try to figure out how to meet and at least share what we've learned in the process. So I think there's a lot of ways to get involved. It just depends on how much you want to put into it. We're not a network that says, here's, this is all that you can get. There's no membership fee. It's really about what do you want to see develop and who do you need to connect with? And we'll try to help you to connect with those folks. If you're a community organizer trying to get a study to help pass a bill in the next legislative session. We might be able to connect you to a clinic or to a group of sociology students or somebody that can help you put together what you need. And I think it could be very valuable, particularly to individuals and communities with very little resources, to focus on the Latino population. But obviously, we can't be a resource to smaller populations of Latinos if the larger populations of Latino centers are not also represented in the network. So I hate to talk about the mighty network so far into when we're going to present it, but just know that we are presenting some information about that online platform where we're facilitating folks to connect.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Professor Herrera. And then what are the different topics then that this Network for Justice focuses on? So how can we learn more about them?
So Professor Herrera talked a little bit about what those topics are. We chose early on, and the group that met in November of 2016 decided that it wanted to start to develop projects in 4 areas of law: immigration, education, economic empowerment, and civic and political participation. Why those 4? First, because they affect the Latino community directly. So in immigration and political participation, for example, we've never, I don't know that we've ever been as targeted as well, I shouldn't say that. It's very clear that the Latino community is being targeted in the area of immigration in the Trump administration. And so it's actually very easy to make those connections between the Latino community and immigration now. Political participation is another example. The several cases that have gone most recently to the Supreme Court have involved Latino districts, right? The discrimination under the Voting Rights Act have focused on Latino districts. Those are the fastest growing districts. Those are the areas, because the Latino community is growing as quickly as it is, in states that are gaining seats, and where seats have to be redistricted, you will see that the Latino community needs representation in order to be effectively placed in those districts. Economic empowerment, we have seen with COVID how industries that are overrepresented by Latinos and by Latino immigrants have been denoted as essential worker industries, right? Which means that somebody needs to be out there trying to figure out how the policies around COVID-19 are affecting Latino communities. Education, that's another area where, for example, COVID is affecting, right? The differences in access to resources for Latino kids and for other kids is becoming quite evident. And so that's another area I think that we feel like we need more focus, both research and advocacy around. So those are the 4 areas that I think we will continue to focus on and try to build both networks and projects around.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that introduction, that explanation. And so knowing the areas that the Network for Justice focuses on and knowing how folks can be involved, how now can we go beyond community conversations and honestly create action? That's what we've been talking about. And how do we best maximize the efforts for this action?
So I'll take that again. I think we've been doing it, right? We've been sort of zeroing in and listening to our groups and our advisory committees, and we've been connecting them with people who are working on these issues and providing resources to help continue to build strategies. So the webinar series is an example of that, right? It's taking something from an idea or a conversation point and putting it to action. We called upon the resources of Texas A&M to put together the series after members of our own advisory group identified the need to bring new and emerging lawyers, for example, into the pipeline. And in order to do that, we've got to sort of have a platform by which people understand what those issues are, so that we can build interest in those issues that are important to the Latino community. But this is just one example of the groups of people that are working together across those platforms. We hope that this type of activity continues to sprout, and that community action first takes the form of form by growing the connections that people are already building organically in their communities. So again, we're not a nonprofit organization. We're not. We seek to build by creating the connections and by supporting those connections as they develop.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And we talked about the network. We've talked about what we can do with it. We talked about the topics and who can be involved. But we want to know a little bit more about these upcoming webinars. What are they about? Who are they going to feature? How do they plug into the Network for Justice?
Sure, absolutely. So this is the first in a series of, I think there's 6 webinars that follow, 1, 2, 3, 4, well, 5 others. And they're listed here. But the next one is September 5th. They're all going to be at the same time. So 12 o'clock West Coast time, 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern. And so you can find the information on the website that's listed under this PowerPoint. But the next one is on really voting rights, right? How we think about the census and how how we are how our districts are created. And we're going to have MALDEF President and General Counsel Thomas Science, who will be part of that conversation and really helped envision this webinar series because he was quite interested in identifying a pipeline of civil rights lawyers to help litigate some of these issues. But also following that, we will talk about Latinx economic opportunity and the age of COVID. And so we definitely have, we've confirmed Professor Rogelio Sanz, who's been doing some amazing research on the impact of Latinos and COVID. And we have a number of others who are going to talk specifically about the economic impact of COVID on small businesses and entrepreneurs in our communities, but also on some of our employees. And the 13th, we're going to tackle the topic of the criminalization of Latino immigrants and also what the Latino community relationship is with Black Lives Matter. I think it's an important topic that's not often frequently addressed in our community, and I think it's something we need to do. So it's part of our webinar series, and we have some great folks that are part of that conversation as well. And then we have a higher education webinar that's going to look at affirmative action. We have one of the attorneys that's litigating the Harvard affirmative action case that's confirmed already. And we're also going to talk about the growth of Hispanic serving institutions, because while a lot of our educational institutions are relying on Latino enrollment as a source of sustainability, the support structures aren't always there. And so we need to have a discussion about what that looks like if we're going to be a third of the population in 2016. And finally, we're going to see how this election turns out, and we're going to have a post-election conversation with former Secretary Julian Castro and others who will be joining us, who will talk about what the election in 2020 meant for Latinos. And so that's just some of the highlights for our upcoming webinar series. We hope that you will tune in, and this is just the beginning of really building our network. We encourage you to sign up for the Mighty Networks platform, and I want to turn it over to a video that shows you how to get onto that platform. And as we do this series, we'll have more information about how you can get involved. But let's turn to the Mighty Network series so that we can show people how to get on. And of course, Teresa Reyes-Flores helped us put this together. So thank you for this next video, Teresa.
This is a tutorial on how to join the Network for Justice website. First, you have to go to network-for-justice.mn.co. You can join the website by using your first and last name and your email address, or you can use your Facebook, LinkedIn, or Apple login information. Here you can also upload a profile picture, but that is not necessary. You can do that later on. Once you log in, it's going to take you to the main feed, and in the top right hand corner, you're able to view your profile. Here, you're able to edit your profile. You can edit your first and last name, add an about you, edit your location, include any personal links like your Facebook, LinkedIn, or website, and draft a brief introduction of yourself of 600 characters or less. Here you can also see the groups and the topics that you have selected. Once you click save on your profile, you can scroll back down and start adding yourself to groups. Here are the groups that you are able to join, and feel free to join the ones that apply to you. There are some groups that you need to request access to, and you can do that here as well. Now, once you view your profile again, you are able to see those groups that you joined. To the left of the screen, you can click the Topics tab, and here you can choose to follow any topics that you are interested in. Once you click the About tab, you can learn more about the Network for Justice and invite others that you want. You can add up to 100 email addresses, and you can click Send, and you can also see the status of those invites that you have sent. In the Members tab, you can search for members, you can view the top, near you, newest, hosts, and online now. In the Discovery tab, there are 3 introductory posts. One is welcoming you to the network, the other one is why the network was built and the member guidelines. Under the Welcome to the Network for Justice, there are also brief tutorials on how to use the website. Here you can also see featured posts, like a question that was posted, upcoming events, and the topics as well. On the top right-hand corner, you can also chat with different members by just searching for their name and sending a chat. You can also view your notifications and create a quick post or event. And here, you can also invite people to the network. You can use the search bar to search anything you want, and any relevant topics, groups, and posts, and even members will appear. When you're back on the home page of the network, here's the feed where, for example, if we select the question of what is your priority for the Network for Justice, you can cheer and reply to people that have responded, or reply yourself. You can also cheer or comment on posts other members have shared. We can scroll back up to the top of the feed and share a post. You can post it to the network, or you can choose specific groups. Here, I'm just going to share a post that I found on immigrants challenging the Trump administration's efforts to scale back the DACA program. And I added the topic immigration. And after that, and the description is ready, I click post, and it has been uploaded to the network. If for whatever reason I need to edit the post, you can click the 3 dots and edit the post, and then just save the changes. You can again click those 3 dots, and you can share the post to your different social media accounts, or your email, or a link. If for whatever reason you need to delete a post, you can also do that as well by clicking the 3 dots. You can also click the events tab, and any events that members have posted will appear on here. You can also create your own by doing the title, description, filling out what kind of event it is, for example, local event or online meeting, the start and end dates, and also adding a link to the event. You can also choose a topic to add, which is at the top above the title. And you can post it to your network or post it to groups as well. That concludes this tutorial. Once again, the website is network-for-justice.mn.co.
Thank you for that, Teresa. That was really helpful. So those of you who want to kind of join the network, or if you see, there might be a group, one of the things we've talked about is we've invited a number of law students to be part of this around the country, and there might be an opportunity for you all to connect and share some activities, but also kind of think about how you support each other and begin to network across law schools. And so that's one way to do it. You might also have, different groups across geographies, whether it's paralegals or it's medical students, that this would be a good platform to connect through. If there isn't a group that you identify with that's already there, just send us an email and we'll see if we can create one for you. Part of it is really building the network based on what individuals need. And so we really want to grow this to be reflective of community needs and not necessarily only our vision. So we wanted to take some questions if anybody has some. We had some submitted earlier when folks registered. And one of those questions I'll go ahead and tackle, which is kind of, I think as Latinos or Chicanos or Hispanics or Latinx or whatever we call ourselves, we spend a lot of energy trying to think about, what's my preferred name. And the truth is that everybody has an individual preferred name. And we opted to, in some of our writing, to talk about the Network for Justice as Latinx because it really represents a new way of thinking that's, inclusive of gender identity, among other things. And so that's one of the reasons that we've used it. But as you'll hear presenters and folks involved with the network, you're going to hear all of the names be used. And so we're really not focused so much on the name because folks can identify however they want to identify, but really focus on the substance of how do we create, more capacity within our communities so that we can be prepared to continue to lead our communities and set a national agenda for what our lives should look like with Latinos as a third of the entire US population. So that was one of the questions. Anybody else have questions? I mean, we answered some of them that came through, but we'd love to have this as an opportunity to answer. I think some folks are getting through. There was another question about how do we protect individuals from hostile environments? And if you're in a community that has a hostile environment for Latinos and you're trying to do work and you're not sure how to proceed with this work, but you think it's needed, reach out to us. We can have a conversation with you. We can try to figure out what the source of the fear might be or the threat. And we'll try to connect you with folks that could provide you resources to help you think about it. Every community is different, and the risk that is presented varies depending on the size and location of the community. And so we're happy to be an ally for you to help find the resources that you need in that particular community.
The question about, there's a question about how Latinx could begin to collaborate on a civil rights agenda across geographic boundaries. I think that the pandemic gives us a great opportunity to start to think about using these tools that are available to us now, Zoom and Cisco WebEx and that sort of thing, to do that kind of collaboration. And again, we invite you to come to us and reach out to any of us and start a discussion about a civil rights issue that you think needs to be addressed. And we can start to put you in touch with resources that'll help start to build a network around that particular issue.
I think the question about connecting with more remote areas, I mean, we're relying on a lot of you to help connect with each other and connect. If there's a need, let's find it and let's figure out how to get resources there. So whether you're in a rural community that says, well, nobody comes here, nobody cares about us, or in a big city who feels like, well, every space is taken, but my voice is still not heard. I think this is a place in terms of our online platform to begin to identify folks that might have similar problems or interests so that you can share resources and support each other. I think part of it is really creating an agenda and a process that empowers multiple constituencies across geographies to be in a better position to handle our demographic growth and not just to be participants in it, but to be leaders of it. So I don't know if we might have one more question, or we don't have any other questions. Well, if we don't have any questions, why don't we put up the information about the upcoming webinars, and we hope to see you in those next webinars that will happen every 2 weeks. And we're going to have some great speakers, so please stay tuned and please ask others to join. We do have a final question about what your interest, if any, do you have in joining the Network for Justice. And so we'd love to hear from you because it helps us think about how we develop future programming. So we'd really appreciate your feedback. We'll stay on for a few minutes in case anybody else has a question. I think maybe one posted. You're welcome. So folks are mostly interested in activating or plug in a regional network. So that's great. That's what we're hoping for.
And in creating community, that one also garnered a lot of responses.
Yeah.
So that's good because we're all on the same page then.
Yeah, and then obtain information only, that's fine. We can't provide information if others don't share it, because we are all doing this on a volunteer basis. So if there are things that are interest to you, please put that in here. Teresa, could you put in the Mighty Networks link on there for us?
Yes.
Yes, Dr. Esplin can definitely connect you to us, but you can also look us up on the Texas A&M Law School website and Professor Saucedo at the UC Davis website. But I'll provide you my email.
I think we have another question about voting rights issues in Texas.
Yeah, well, I think you want to maybe stay tuned for the presentation on September 15th, because we're going to talk specifically, I think, about Texas. It's hard to talk about voting rights and Latinos and not talk about Texas. So please join us for that conversation. And
not just about Texas, but also about, I don't know, surprising issues that are coming up in the census that directly affect the Latino community.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for joining, everyone. We appreciate your input and look forward to connecting with you.